It's time to be woke, take off your shades, it helps see through the smoke, cause the wicked hide behind the cloak, and if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked, so listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't, is this the fog or smog, cause there's a difference when you breathe it in, so don't let the corporate media take you for a spin, this that morning show, they put you in the know, so I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, 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 yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the fact.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I am Andy Kennedy. It is Wednesday morning. Thank you very much for tuning in to see us today. We are continuing our second part in the series of Veterans Off-Grid, with the presentation of part 2 of the video. Feeling a little off today. I'm not gonna lie. Wasn't really able to put my finger on it. But then when I talked to my co-host this morning, she hit the nail on the head, let's say. Feisty. I'm feeling feisty today. So I'm not sure how that's going to translate. Maybe a good thing, might get me in a lot of trouble. Who knows? But I think all we can do is proceed as normal and see what happens. And that starts with the introduction of my lovely and talented co-host, Miss Carrie Barber. Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning, Andy. Good morning. I remember to unmute. So I am on top of things this morning. And yeah, Andy's feisty, which I'm not gonna lie, I love it. I think it's hilarious. So I will try not to poke the bear too much. But we got some really good things to talk about. And if you caught our broadcast on Monday, you will know already that we're on an exciting story. This is a 3-part story that we're working on. This is about what do we do with the climate crisis and sustainability and housing, and we've got veterans, all of these different topics rolled into this one story. So what I love about it is it's a solution-based story. We could sit on here and talk about climate change and all these issues, these very big pressing issues, and leave you depressed and weeping on the floor. We don't do that. We find solutions. So what we're going to present to you today is just a little bit more on the story, a deeper dive. And I just want to reiterate, when I first tackled the story about Veterans Off-Grid, it was, to me, just a feel-good story. It was a human interest. It was nice. And then I started to dig into it because I'm a cynic. I'm like, is this some hippie bullshit? And is it, just the granola crunchy bunny huggers trying to make themselves feel better, or is there something really to this? And yeah, there's something to this. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the viability of it and why you maybe should consider something like this or a variation on this for yourself. So this is what is possible. And did I miss anything, Andy, from Monday? That was a whole 2 sleeps ago, so I may have forgotten some things.
No, I think people, if they haven't seen it, should go back and look at it. Obviously, but these specific parts stand on their own as well if you haven't. But certainly, the full effect is seeing all 3 once they're all out by Friday morning. But no, yeah, I think you've covered it. And these guys speak for themselves, right? So I think we're good to go, Carrie.
Okay, perfect. So let's get started. And I have another piece of this mini documentary that we put together. This one's pretty short, so it just goes into a little more information about the viability of it, some of the science into it, as well as I have this amazing person that I got to meet in the interview, Angie Hernandez. She has this incredible story. She was working for a bank in the process of going through a divorce. Her daughter was turning 18, going off to college. So she found herself in a massive transition period. And she tells the story about, she's like, look, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I working this 9 to 5 job and I'm barely making ends meet. I'm in the middle of a divorce. What do I do? And she left everything behind, everything, packed up her car and actually became a volunteer at Veterans Off Grid. This is the charity organization we are talking about. And what happened to her next that I really want people to pay attention to. First, Angie is just a delightful, vivacious, sunny person, but she said she wasn't always that way. And it's just, she's got an amazing story. So without further ado, let's get into part 2 of this, and we'll meet you back on the other side. And as always, if you have got comments, questions, critiques, complaints, whatever, drop it in the chat, and we're going to have that conversation in just a minute. So Andy, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Homelessness and housing insecurity is already at a crisis level. Maybe we should stop waiting for civic leaders to provide the answer. And maybe the answer has always been right in front of us. For thousands of years, people have built sustainable, efficient, and low-cost homes. Today, the rest of the world has continued on that path, refining building techniques that work. From wattle and daub to compressed earth blocks, these materials are plentiful, low cost, and provide for highly efficient buildings. A small group of veterans, led by founder Ryan Timmermans, hopes to lead the country back to a sustainable future, one that includes low cost, strong, and highly efficient building materials suitable for every community in every state.
And so we're trying to hit all of these things at the same time because it's cumulative. They help each other. And that's what we're trying to do, is create a comprehensive plan that isn't just housing a veteran. It's not just feeding a human. It's not just picking up trash. It's all of it at once. And because you're doing that all at once, it's going to work. On a very, very, very tight budget, we're building houses. Houses are extremely expensive in this day and age to build them. So I've got to try to lower that cost as much as possible to make sure that our donors' money is being used as best as possible and stretches as far as possible. You know, I don't get paid. Nobody here gets paid who's a resident. And we just turn that money basically into building materials to continue building, providing places for people to live. And in about 3 months, we're going to have all of the stimulus completely cut off. People are going to have to pay their mortgages again, but they're going to have to pay it all up front in a lump sum. They're going to have to pay their rent again, and they're going to have to pay it all up front in a lump sum. How many of you think have actually saved that money? They're just trying to make ends meet. So you're going to have 20 million people who are homeless. What are we doing? I have friends over there who are being kicked off their land because they violated some code or another. I have elders that they've lived there for 70 years, passed the house down to their children, but they don't have what is considered code compliancy. And so they're being evicted until they can spend $50,000 to upgrade their home to code compliant. I have a friend who was cited for having a teepee with no dryer hookup. Excuse me, have you ever seen a teepee with a dryer hookup?
Ryan's vision for Veterans Off Grid at first seems daunting. He is not only providing shelter for our veterans, but a path forward and a new vital mission. But how exactly does he plan to help America's displaced veterans go from this to this? With the help of this man, Mark Goldman, one of the state's leading architects and an expert in sustainable earth building design.
My name is Mark Goldman, and I'm a registered architect in the state of New Mexico. Dues-paying, fully fledged member of the American Institute of Architects. I'm a consultant to the state of New Mexico on affordable housing, a paid consultant to work on tax credit, LIHTC, multi-million-dollar housing projects. I'm the chairman now. They changed. I'm the coordinator of the construction technology department for UNM Taos, and I've been at the same time, in order to do the work, I'm a licensed commercial contractor. I know and I understand what it's like to not be able to have adequate housing. I mean, we were, I was it was a rough childhood. The only adults that I met until I was a certain age were gamblers, alcoholics, and criminals. That's what I thought all adults were. And then, so in the architecture world, I serve a pretty straight-laced clientele. So it's a breath of fresh air to be able to doing work for people who are so desperate for housing.
Mark's empathy and technical knowledge paired with Ryan's enthusiasm for sustainable building with a humanitarian focus set the stage for what could be possible in addressing the nation's affordable housing crisis.
I felt that there was a housing crisis in this country that does not seem to be spoken about. I mean, I hear it in my classes every day in class. All my students talk about how hard it is to get good housing. And, I have, New Mexico senators and congresspeople come to my class. They know my program is a good feel-good opportunity when they visit Taos. Really, it's conversations with my wife. She's a social worker here in Taos. And I'd say one of her most common issues to address with people is inability to find housing, really struggling. So there's this disconnect. It's like, wait a minute, this elephant in the room is so gigantic, but no one seems to want to talk about it. But everywhere I go, people are talking about how expensive. I mean, housing's it's the most expensive object in American society. And yet we just kind of assume that, look at Architectural Digest and look at this, $5 million greenhouse that someone's building in Malibu. And isn't that cool? And think that that's the way it's supposed to be developed. But it's not a trickle down green building is not a trickle down technology. There's one way they do it for rich people, and there has to be a different way to do it for working people.
Last November, I went to Chicago for an annual gathering of the tax credit industry. It takes a lot of players, bankers, brokers, law firms, consultants, developers, to put affordable housing deals together. Over the past 30 years, housing tax credits have helped build more than 2.5 million affordable units. The program costs about $8 billion a year, an amount that's been growing.
PBS Frontline published a study in 2017 showing that available affordable housing units dropped from 70,000 down to less than 59,000 nationwide, while costing taxpayers 66% more in tax credits, which went to big banks and private investors. And civic leaders are passing along those costs to taxpayers. This is exactly where Mark Goldman sees an opportunity.
And maybe what I've seen with Ryan's, if he wanted to pull it off, is that France, Great Britain, even Germany, everywhere, Italy, they fund affordable housing. Ronald Reagan, whatever it was, in my thesis I cited, he uttered the phrase, "The U.S. is no longer in the business of housing." So they went to Section 8 and have private developers. So we don't fund decent affordable housing in the U.S. anymore. It's all done to, to enrich developers. So you need to experiment and do good affordable housing, and to experiment, you need some kind of subsidy, which we don't have. So the subsidy we have is experimenting with veteran labor. We're using veterans off grid as an incubator, as a test site to work out what I feel are more critical tests, which are going to be pulling a permit from the city, which will be done through the state, and have lots of oversight in really a suburban neighborhood. But we need to work out our, where we're able to sort of test our stuff out of Veterans Off Grid.
Aside from the technical aspects of the sustainable building material, Mark stresses the importance of the serenity that comes from living in a natural home. I spoke with Angie Hernandez, who is not only a volunteer with Veterans Off Grid, but lives in a home built with the exact same materials.
My journey began in natural building about 7 years ago when I knew like sustainability was something that I wanted. I had a regular, just life and a mortgage, and I was overstuffed. And so I wanted to live a better life on this planet. So I basically drove away from everything I owned and was looking for internships where I could learn natural building or farming. Or I bought the land a year and a half ago. And so we decided on a method called hyper Adobe, which uses a mesh bag instead of a full plastic bag, I guess. So it's like Adobe brick, but you make it row by row. So it saves water, it saves time, it saves all kinds of things. And so that's the method we chose. And then when we started the project, I didn't have any money and we just went for it. We're like, the earth is free, so we'll just start building the walls. And then I was posting on Facebook every day. Here's day 1, here's day 2, here's day 3. Oh, now I need to borrow a generator, and now I need to borrow, this tool or whatever, because I didn't have any tools. Kenny had some. But anyway, so people were responding to me, oh, I have windows, I have this and that, And so within 30 work days that were spread out over several months, I had so many of the pieces of the puzzle to build this slightly under 300 square foot home. Feel very grounded in the structure, and I would say that's the overall vibe that people get when they come in the house. They just always compliment like how good it feels, how peaceful it feels. They have mentioned the energy, but a lot of times they gravitate to have a seat on the floor instead of sitting in a chair. And I always ask people, why do you sit on the floor? Like, do my chairs not seem comfortable? And they say, well, it just seems to feel so good in here. Like, that's what I want to do. And, it's still an earthen floor. It has carpet over it. So I don't know if there's like just the natural energy from the earth being so inviting. I have a huge sense of freedom because now that I've built this off-grid home, I don't have any bills. My cell phone bill is my only bill in life. So I just need to eat.
Veterans Off Grid is clearly onto something, and with the help of building professionals like architect Mark Goldman, their mission to enlist the nation's veterans in addressing the homelessness and housing crisis is a promising one. However, the push towards privatization and profiteering still has a hold on day-to-day operations. Is there a way to address these obstacles without having to take on the big banks? For the answer to that, we will next take a look at what has already been done quietly all across this country for over a decade.
Okay, welcome back. Part 2 of Veterans Off Grid. Again, Carrie, wonderful job of reporting. These are really cool and really informative video series. You did an amazing job on it.
Well, thank you, Andy. And again, I appreciate your video editing assistance with this. You always do a great job. And I'm watching the comments come in the chat, and I know that some of you were not here with us on Monday, so I just want to make a few clarifying points. Veterans Off Grid is not a construction company. What they do is they're helping veterans with PTSD regain their sense of purpose. And part of what they're doing is teaching them building techniques in the hope that these veterans take it home all across the country and show their community how this is done. So it's all regular people volunteering and working for each other. And this is why I think Angie's story that you just saw is so important, because she was just a regular volunteer who went to help out, took the skills that she learned there and built her own house. Now, mind you, her house was meant to fit her needs and her lifestyle. So it's a little bit smaller. I think she said her first one was 300 square feet. Her second one was about 7,000 square feet. But what got me and was remarkable in that is Angie was able to do it in about 30 days, working part-time on it with a little bit of help. And she's got no bills. And I checked all of this, and it's absolutely accurate. So that was my first, like, well, maybe there's something more to it. And then there was another question early on, I think this was Aspen, who asked about, in New Mexico, they're not building Adobe, they're just building stucco. So they actually are building with Adobe, and they're still building with brick, and they're doing a little more stick build. Stucco is on the outside. That is just the covering on the outside. In fact, the house that I am personally working on is going to be these compressed earth blocks. Think of it as Adobe 3 or 4.0. But because of the building code here, I have to have a wrap on my house, and that means I'm going to be doing stucco. So my house will be built the same way, but building codes is what it is. And we'll get into that in part 3. So the whole intention of this series is to introduce you to this topic that you may not be familiar with, show you that this building can be done absolutely anywhere and is being done in the rest of the world. The biggest reason, and you'll see this on Friday, the reason we're doing stick build here in the United States, lobbyists. We have national organizations and lobbyists. The rest of the world never abandoned this building practice. They're still using it. It's still cheap, affordable, and you can do it yourself. But here in the US, we haven't. We are relegated to the big builders and all of these sort of things. We have to wait. And someone else said, they can't build enough houses for the demand. No, these companies can't, but we can. I can build my house. You can build your house. You can help your neighbor build theirs. And Andy, you mentioned it, the Amish model, the barn raising, and the community. And that is really the heart of what this story is, what is possible, right?
Absolutely. And there was a couple of quick points that I wanted to make that stood out to me. And this point that you just brought up about the size of the house that Angie made, right? In terms of what you need to, as a shelter to live in, right? We see, that in the capitalist society that we live in, that, people are judged by the things that they own and the sheer size and land of these places that they live in, for 1 or 2 or maybe 3 people that are 3, 4, 5,000 square foot homes that are filled with rooms that nobody ever uses, right? And the fact that her first home was 300 square feet, right? Which is in terms of that tiny, but in terms of a shelter, everything that one person would need for what a shelter is supposed to do, right? And so once we can disconnect the mentality of the capitalists, where bigger is better and you're judged by the things that you own and the majesticness of it, then we understand that what a shelter is supposed to do, and we're better off for it. And then we enjoy the better things in life that aren't based on capitalism and acquiring useless things, right? The other point that I wanted to mention, this is quickly something that I just looked into, why these clay or bricks that you're using to make a house are so effective, is because when you put up a normal house, right, which has siding or particle board or pressed particle board or brick on the side of it, these houses are extremely inefficient in terms of capturing heat or capturing cold or keeping you protected from the outside because of the nature of them, right? That's why when you build a stick house, you need to insulate the house with like a fiberglass or a foam insulation, right, in order to maintain temperature within the house, right? Whereas when you have these clay bricks, they don't act the same way. They don't transmit heat or cold through them. And so they're way, way more efficient. And that's why when you build a house like this, it can stand on its own, once the building code is adjusted for these places, and why they work so well. And the fact that they're, indestructible and guaranteed for 100 years. That's a bit of a bonus too, right? I just thought I'd touch base on those two subjects quickly.
Right, and real quick, I just want to address this. Red, you're new to our audience, so first off, I appreciate the snark. I love it, honestly. But if you're not going to pay attention to what's going on, then okay. So Nadia, to address your answer, we are talking about building a house sustainably with very, very little resources. And Red maybe missed the interview that we just did with Angie. Angie had nothing, Red. Angie had nothing. And she put it together. So we are actually talking about using the materials under your feet, not going out and buying lumber, not going out and selling all the assets you don't have. We're talking about using the things that are right there, right in front of you that you maybe didn't know you could use to build a house that is sustainable, energy efficient, and will last. So catch up. And right now, I want to transition right now. We're talking about getting rid of all of the tropes and material pieces that we've been raised for. I want to bring on somebody now who's literally doing just that right now. So I hope everybody will help us in welcoming Devin Scott. Devin Scott is just relocated from Illinois here to New Mexico to work on the project that we are undertaking here, Red. So pay attention. So Devin, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Morning, guys. I'm so excited to be here.
Unmute. So Devin,
gosh.
You're fine. You're fine. We can see. So you're a little bit on the younger side. I don't want to be an ageist, but there are generations between me and Andy and you, correct?
Yes, I am the classic Gen Z. I'm 20 years old.
20 years old.
So yeah, bit
Okay.
younger.
A little bit. So you just went through the process of paring down everything that you own, right? And regardless of our income level or our age or whatever, we accumulate stuff that we feel is so important to who we are. And I gotta have the stuff. You just went through the purge process to come to this position. And what was that like for you to make this transition?
It was tough. I'm not gonna lie. I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate. I had accumulated a lot of stuff. I'm kind of a pack rat. So it was, I went from, an entire room full of stuff down to, I took with me maybe about 3 boxes and my cat. So it was, I had to let go of a lot of stuff that I found myself superficially attached to. There was a lot of stuff that when I got down to it, I'm like, I don't really need this to be happy. It was a bunch of extra clothes that, just didn't need. I'm fine with a couple t-shirts and some cargo shorts, even though they might not be the most fashionable.
Makes sense.
But,
so
yeah.
tell everybody a little bit about the story. Why are you participating in this? And I just want to make this point because Nadia asked this question. You don't have to leave civilization. It's not that you have to go in the middle of nowhere out in the forest. What we were talking about on Monday is there are vacant lots in every major city in most suburbs. Buy one. And you can make payments on that. You can get a loan, you can get whatever. So like Detroit, I found corner lots, highly desirable corner lots that have been abandoned for about $2,000. So these are things, maybe you don't have that today, but you can put a little money aside to buy your lots. and you can do this type of building right there, right there. So you would have access to electric and water, whereas I'm in the middle of nowhere and I don't have any of those things. So it's possible at any of those things. So my apologies, Devin. Just wanted to bring the chat up to, yeah, $2,000, Aspen, 2,000. So Devin, getting back to why a bright young 20-year-old would give up everything for this kind of this sounds crazy. What are you doing? Why are you here?
So I think it can really start right after my 18th birthday. My stepdad's sister had invited me out to her homestead in Oregon. And so I went out there for 2 months, and it was a completely new experience. I had grown up in the Chicago suburbs my entire life, had never left Illinois, had never even seen the mountains or the ocean. And to go out where internet didn't work all the time, we had composting toilets. It was something I had been interested in for a while, but it wasn't something that I had an experience with. And I got out there and I started working with cob. I made a pizza oven, and seeing the versatility of the material. And this is a material we've used for so incredibly long that not many people in Western society know about. And I realized that I wanted to make sustainability my purpose, in not just an environmental sense, but in all senses of the word. So financial sustainability, because my generation, we kind of realized that we can't own houses. They're a little too out of our price bracket, especially with where the wage is right now. And so financial sustainability, being able to have a house with no debts, personal sustainability, being able to do something that I feel like is making a difference in the world. And that's one of the main reasons I'm out here, is to help prove that the eco bricks will work and is a viable solution for a lot of housing problems we have all across the United States, not just in Oregon, not just in New Mexico, but it can be done in Detroit, Chicago, New York, anywhere. And it's something that may not be for everybody, but is a lot more feasible than people think, and it's a lot more accessible than people realize.
Yeah, I think that is part of the point. So I know that some people in the chat are still a little confused. And Eric, I think you bring up a good point. He says, so the greater goal would be community-controlled living spaces in neighborhoods. That's one possibility. If that works in your area and everybody's like, yeah, let's do it, more green spaces and helping each other in that way, sure. What we're trying to present to you is another view on what is possible. So we're talking about a building material that is free, it's under your feet. It has an R value starting at 35 to 39. It withstands fire, F4 hurricanes, and F4 tornadoes. I was intrigued. And so, Devin, for your perspective, I think you touched on something really important, because even though we have a generational divide here, my generation, we cannot retire. We don't have that savings. The cost of living has gone up. Our wages are stagnant. We are squeezed. Some of us have kids that are trying to go to college. We're paying for that. And then we have our aging parents that we need to take care of. There's no way that my generation is going to be able to retire comfortably. And as we saw from the report, more and more retirees are falling into homelessness. So it's an exacerbated problem. But your generation never even considered retirement, let alone home ownership, right? Are you the generation that ruined the diamond market? You guys weren't buying enough diamonds?
Yeah. Who's got the time? Who's got the money?
Yeah. Way to go. Way to go,
Yeah.
Devin.
I'm so sorry, Andy.
Well, I'm surprised simply because you went across the country without a gaming console. That's one thing that blows me away. But just a quick sidebar here, Carrie. In my area where I live in Ontario in Canada, the small pieces of land, of unused land, that are maybe just about an acre in size or slightly larger, are currently selling for just under $300,000.
300,000.
Yeah.
So, and this was always my question about people who live in Los Angeles, talking to Jackie and everyone else. I'm like, where do you guys live? Because even, when I was making a good salary, I couldn't afford an efficiency in Los Angeles. And so we have millions of people all across the country, not just LA and California, Atlanta, Georgia, New Jersey, New York, all of these cities where we are being priced out of even apartments, let alone homes. So what we're presenting here is just an example of something that you might consider. And I'm coming from my perspective where I was like, yeah, this is just people go off into the woods and do this. But no, in part 3, I really want you to come back. And you in particular, Red, because I think that your cynicism is really, it's helpful to the conversation, because you are exactly where I was. But when we see the examples of the Army Corps of Engineers using this material to rebuild Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places, as well as using it for their own barracks here in this country, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you at least consider what is possible, right? So Devin, there's a bigger picture here to just Cobb and building. You're here also. What was the title that you picked here? Animal specialist?
Oh yeah, animal care specialist.
Right. So
Yeah.
So Devin joined our team in this capacity, and tell us a little bit about what that focus is. So this is not just going through the motions of testing a test case for this building material. You are here for something more as well, right? So talk about that.
I am here to live my purpose, which through my journey in my short 20 years in life, I've found in order to be happy, I'd like a community, and I would like to feel like I'm making a difference. And right now we have 2 goats, which I'm very happy with. And it's really interesting learning how close to being off-grid you can actually go. Because most people don't realize, you don't necessarily have to buy your stuff from the store. And with goats, it's, eventually we'll be able to get milk and we won't have to buy milk from the store. And it's just, my purpose is just to try to make us as sustainable as possible. And I'd like to go completely off grid if possible. And I think I just want to change the game, because so many, at so many points in my life and everybody's life, you've been told by society, like, what you need is a full-time job, a nice car, white picket fence, 2.5 kids, all of these things. And I was so incredibly stuck in that rut. I got back from Oregon and I was working full-time at a job. I had moved out, and I kept pushing myself and burning myself out. And I'm like, what am I actually working towards? White picket fence? I don't actually want a white picket fence. Why am I, working so hard towards something that I don't even want? Because I've always had this dream of being able to not live in the suburbs. And I think the important part is that this stuff can be implemented in the suburbs too. You can have your own garden. You can, in some areas, you can have your own chickens. You can have, very small livestock, things like that. Small steps. You don't need to go out in the middle of the mountains and go completely off grid like I'm doing. And it's not for everybody, because, I think it was just yesterday we were celebrating that my fridge was on all day. And then now it's not. It's not easy, but it's definitely rewarding. I've never felt so grateful for energy and water and the things I've taken advantage of. And it's so rewarding to just step outside in the morning and breathe in the mountain air and go, this is what I'm working towards. This is what I'm working to do. And I wanted to do something with my time, and I felt, another part of being in the suburbs is I wasn't sure exactly what I could do for activism. I think a lot of people in my generation get stuck in, we know that there's a lot of shit going on. We just don't know how to fix it. And so I've been blessed with some really cool friends. A few of them had organized Black Lives Matters protests in the area I grew up in. I organized the school walkout around the Parkland shooting. It was a month afterwards. And that was like my first taste of, oh, I can actually do things, instead of going, sitting in nihilism as my generation is often doing, because we know things are bad. There's no denying that. There's no denying that we don't have a livable wage. We can't afford a house, let alone retirement. But the thought that, oh, there is actually things I can do that are just in my grasp. Voting. I tell all my friends, you're not a friend of mine if you don't vote. Things like that, writing to local politicians, because so many people don't realize that local politicians are as, if not more important than, the big guys at the top. And so a lot of this has just been, whatever I can do that is within my grasp, I want to do it.
That's perfectly encapsulated, absolutely, and I really appreciate that. So yeah, Red, I get it. I had a small 401k, and I was able to sell a house and do this. Here's an example of Devin, a young kid, 20. You're a man. My apologies, Devin. Who did the same thing. So if we're talking about what you can't do, if you are constantly in the mindset, like Devin said, the nihilist mindset where it's all shitty and nothing is ever going to change, then okay, you can sit with that. You can sit with that and you can deal with that. What we're presenting here is what if, and not just what if, but people who are actually doing it, and not just, as Devin said, out in the middle of nowhere, but in the suburbs and in other locations too. So we're presenting one of them. We have many examples of people who are building container homes. And if you drive through suburbs, you will see these. Well, what did it cost them to do that? And it's a lot lower cost than, like Andy brought up the example of $300,000. I know that for Angie Hernandez, the interview that we saw, if she was trying to build a small little casita out of the stick build, it would have cost her 10 times more than what she actually spent. So what we're presenting here are possibilities and the what ifs. If this upsets you, I'm good with that, because apathy is immovable. But if you are now uncomfortable and pushing back and trying to poke holes, I like where you're at. I like it because you're thinking about it. It's forcing you to think about it. All of your objections are absolutely perfect. So yeah, so I really appreciate that. So Devin, let's get back to your generation, because it's so funny, because we always seem that we're separated. But everything that you're talking about with, college kids and everybody trying to make their way, and the attitude of there's just so much going on, I can't possibly make a difference. We're feeling that. And I think that's part of what Red is expressing in the chat here. There's nothing I can do about it. Nothing's good. All of this is just unrealistic. So let's just sit with it. But we have 20-year-olds, 18, 20-year-olds and older feeling that way. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think a common theme that sounds kind of silly with my generation is the need for cottagecore, which is the idea of moving out into the middle of nowhere and living in, a cottage, kind of romanticizing it. But I think the important part to, kind of pick apart through that is that it's not necessarily the need to go live in the middle of nowhere. It's the need to separate oneself from society and what society has told us we need to do. And I am very proud of a lot of people from my generation, especially after the Parkland shootings. I think that was one of the defining moments where a lot of us went, oh, we can actually do something. And we have voices, even though we're just children. I think I was about 15, 16 at the time. And just this realization of we don't need to sit and be stagnant. We can actually do what we can. And I think that's my motto with all of this, is just, you don't have to, Rome was not built in a day. You don't have to do everything, but just do what you can. So, you know, a lot of people also have this dichotomy of either people, you know, the environmental problems are on the people or they're on the corporations. We can focus on both of those at the same time. You know, not just going, well, the corporations are causing all of these environmental problems, which they're causing a lot of them, but we can also do things on an individual level. And I think that's what I'm aiming to do for myself, and just show that this is, you can do this no matter your age, your gender, your ethnicity, you know, sexual orientation, your, how able-bodied you are. You can do things that are within your grasp. You just need the education about it. And so, you know, like I said, this is not for everybody. You know, you might not have the resources right away to build your own house, but, you know, you can do little things that do add up, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And one of the examples that you and I were talking about before we got started this morning is during World War II, there was this push to get everybody to start their own, what they called a victory garden. And that was because during World War II, you had a kind of a breakdown of the food supply chain. And so they were teaching people that you can do this in your backyard, on your patio, on your small space. And by you doing this, you are taking care of yourself. And then neighbors got together and helped each other with the community gardens. This is part of where that came from. So you're right. This is not necessarily for everyone. Not everyone's got the means. Some people will have to find a different solution. But what does happen is you start to, like, I'll admit, I had no understanding of any of this, but by just doing a little bit of research, now I have contacts with people who are experts in this and have experience, and I know where the community gardens are, and I can go there and get free resources and mentors to help me plant a garden. And I didn't know anything about goats. Now I have resources and experts and all of these things who are there to help. And I think that gets to the core of all of this. We are at our best when things are at their worst. So my neighbors are available and more than willing to help answer questions and get me there, to show me different resources if we remember that we are part of that community. So would you agree with that, Devin?
Definitely. I think one of the biggest lies that has been pushed to us is that we need to do things by ourselves to prove our worth. And, you know, this whole pull yourself up by the bootstraps mentality, it doesn't factor in that you can ask for help, and community is always stronger than a single person. And I think that was one of my biggest takeaways from not only Oregon, but the start of my time here, is that it really does take a village, but when you take a village, it is just that much stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're getting back to the basics, I think. So what are your plans here for this particular project? What would you like to see happen, right? So you've got all this vim and vigor and youth, and you still have behind you all of your friends who are stuck in the same situation you just walked away from. What now can you present to them, or what would you hope that comes out of your efforts?
Hopefully a lot of education, because I feel like a lot of parts of this project people just don't know about. You know, not a lot of people know about cob. A lot of times when I talk to my friends about cob, they're like, oh, what the heck is that? You know, and you know, I would really just like to show that this is possible, and not just for a select few. Educate people, have people come out and learn how to do that, so they can take that and apply it in their own situation, kind of tailor fit it, because not every situation is the same. You know, we keep going back to not everyone can go out in the middle of nowhere. But, you know, you could start a victory garden. You could have a small greenhouse. You could start something with your neighbors. And once you know how to build cob, you know, you could build your own pizza oven. It's, I think what I'd really like to do here is just, if I educate one person, I'll be happy. And have one person go, okay, that does sound like a good idea for me, and help someone in their situation, I would be a very happy man.
Devin,
I think that's all we can ask. Go ahead.
do you get the sense that there are more young people in your age group, or maybe slightly older, that feel the same way that you do? Do you get a sense of that, or do you think that your situation is very unique?
I definitely get a sense of a lot of people feel like they can and should be doing more. They just don't know where to start. And I was definitely in that boat, and I'm really thankful that I have the resources I have. And I think that's half the battle, is just getting the resources out, because I know that a lot of people, especially my generation, you know, with not being able to afford a house, you know, would love an environmentally friendly solution. So just getting the education out is, I think, the most important thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that, certainly. And I just wanted to comment quickly, again, some of the pushback in the chat, and against, specifically against you, Carrie, where it said that you had capital to begin with. You were able to sell what you owned in order to facilitate a move across the country to do what you're doing now, right? But let's not forget that in the video we just showed, Angie was able to do the same thing, and she had nothing, right? She had no assets and no money, and made a life for herself off grid through Ryan and that team, right? So that's very important. We're not, you know, people shouldn't have to apologize for their past, right? That is what it is. What you do with the information you have, and how you want to try to help people, is the important thing. And if we can instill more of a sense of community in our areas, in our districts, right? People do help each other, and they, in the same way that we've talked about in terms of the Amish community or the Mennonite community in Canada, that if we help each other, if we can do more things as in terms of helping one another to learn the skills to do that, then the capitalist mentality of buy, and then if you end up getting a house, you can sell it as a means of getting, you know, allowing yourself to retire, because that's the only value that you have that you can get rid of, right? Well, if you don't have to spend, you know, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 on a home and take 25, 30 years to pay it off, then any of the money that you have works for you and allows you to enjoy your life without having to deal with those situations, right? And I think that's a very important point.
Oh, absolutely. And first, Aspen, thank you so much for the super chat tip. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Very generous of you. And then Red is still coming back with some, I think, very valid critiques. He says, proving that one person did it is fine, but you come off as saying you should do it because that person did it with nothing. That's what I objected to. And Red, I mean, nobody said that. We're offering it as a suggestion, and then I want you to come back Friday, Red. I want you to come back, because saying one person did it is fine. No, you missed the point where the entire rest of the world is building with the same material. The rest of the world, Red. And then even in this country, it is happening. Many, many people with zero resources. So someone asked what cob was. Devin, you want to describe what cob is? People aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, cob is a building material similar to Adobe. It's usually a mix of clay, sand, cement, straw, and all these things work to make the clay stronger. So it's able to insulate heat really well. It's able to keep things cool really well. And just my personal taste, it's also a really beautiful art form too. You can do a lot of things with it because it's a fluid material. And it's also pretty readily available. Not all areas have the level of clay that we do. But, you know, all areas do have at least a little bit of clay, and it's decently cheap too.
That was the part that got me. So I was always under the impression that in order to get clay in your soil, you had to live in Georgia, South Carolina, New Mexico, that type of thing. And then I found out, we'll talk more about this on Friday, it's everywhere. It's literally everywhere. In Illinois, I could have built with cob because there's enough clay in the soil. So get a shovel, right? And there are ways to test your soil. So like, for example, I had my soil tested. I'm at 45% clay, 55% dirt and fines, just regular sand. So all I need to add to my soil is a tiny bit of Portland cement. A bag of Portland cement is like $3. So that is going to last me a long time, just adding this small amount. So those are my material costs: a shovel and a bag of Portland cement. And I can build bricks. In Illinois, maybe the clay content isn't that high. So what I would add is a little more clay, which is a $5 bag. You can get at a hobby shop, at a big box store, just about anywhere, and add that in. And that makes the strength that is needed. And on Friday, again, Red, I really want you to, Red, I really want you to come back on Friday when we start talking about the science behind all of this and how strong this actual material is. So like I said, if it's not for you, that's great. Go about your business. Enjoy your life. Have a good time. We're presenting this information as an alternative for some people to consider, and you can even retrofit your house. If you live in a trailer, double wide, a regular stick-built house, you can retrofit your house with this kind of material and gain an R value from up to 35 to 49. And you know, Andy, you talked about it. This makes it more efficient to heat and cool. So yeah,
absolutely.
So Devin, we're just about out of time, and I really appreciate everybody in the chat weighing in, positive, negative, still critiquing. I think this is a really great intro conversation. But do you have any last thoughts that you want to leave people with, to sit with, until we can come back to this on Friday and finish out the topic?
Yeah, I think it sounds cheesy, but I didn't. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, I never would have thought this would be happening. I went through mental health struggles. I wasn't even sure if I was going to live to 18, so I didn't really have a plan after that. And, just oh my gosh, I went from working a full-time retail job that kind of sucked the soul out of me to living one of my dreams of being a weird goat farmer. I've got next to nothing. I've got my, suitcase full of clothes, a box, and my cat. I just would like people to know that it is more feasible than it sounds. Not for everybody, but it is. And if you make the push, talk to your community. I think community is one of the most important aspects. There is a lot more change that you can do than you realize.
Well said. Well said. Thank you so much, Devin, for joining us this morning. Really appreciate that. And,
thanks for having me.
Devin is now Devin's taking over social media for TikTok and a number of other things. So you can follow along with Devin and what he's going through, the good, bad, the ugly, as the journey continues. So I hope that you will keep in touch with Devin and everything that's going on. Ask him questions. Very engaging. Obviously, is interested in the subject. So thank you. All right.
Anytime.
Andy,
thank you so much for having me.
You're great. I'm still going through some of the comments in the chat, and I really love the engagement and especially the pushback. I think this is great because this really starts the conversation for people who may not have been interested in or understood what was going on. So I love all of this. And again, Red, I hope you will come back on Friday, because not only are we going to delve into the Army Corps of Engineers, the science behind it, the engineering data available, but we're also bringing Ryan on so that Ryan can talk about what Veterans Off Grid is doing now, particularly in the space of helping veterans and homelessness, as well as these types of building materials and getting the code compliance aspect of it, changing code where necessary and working with local officials to make sure that all the projects that he is working on fit right in line. So we'll show you how to do that from a civic engagement point of view. So excellent, excellent. I really appreciate it. So Red, you're my new favorite person. Thank you so much. Andy, you have any final thoughts or observations you want to take us out with?
Yeah, I just wanted to just quickly reiterate that this story started with your interview with Ryan and what he was doing in terms of helping to house veterans and combat climate change and a number of other different initiatives that he was trying to do. So this is where this all generated from, right? But the bigger story that we were talking about was that this can be a viable solution for some people who can't afford to buy a home or that are struggling where they are, can't find work, right? But this is obviously just one solution of a larger picture that can have the potential to unhook people from the capitalist mentality that we talk about that is so harmful in our society and making, people that are poor just in more dire straits, right? And so that's an important part of this as well. There's lots of different materials to build from. There's lots of different solutions, but that conversation, we need it to keep it open and we need to discuss it further. And that's the best conversation that we can have. Anyways, I'm done speaking and I thought I behaved very well considering my mentality this morning. But thank you everyone for tuning in this morning and hope you enjoyed our show. Please support Fred Hampton Leftists, like and subscribe. And we are very happy to be part of that team. And thank you again for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. And we will see you here bright and early on Friday morning. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keep it in G. Whoa.